Not yet. I'm going live here in 1 sec.
Can I do a sound check, please? Doherty here.
Miss Doherty, we can hear you. At least I can. Sound good?
Loud and clear.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. President, we are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, today is Monday, April 12th, 2021. This is Barberton City Council. We will go into our committee meetings before our legislation meetings. And the first committee up will be City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Call to order City Properties, Parks and Recreation is Monday, April 12th, 2021, 6 p.m. We are virtual with all members of the committee present, plus people noted. I don't see a name for caller number 3.
It might be Don Patterson. I'm not sure what caller I am.
Yep, that's you, Director. Thank you much.
Okay.
All right, topics of discussion. I have no new requests for legislation. Miscellaneous discussion. I will open it up to the committee if they have anything. Councilor Coburn.
I just wanted to say that I'm working on the Mumfest quilt that will be up for tickets will be available when it's finished, and it's going to have 30 years of memories involved in it. So it was supposed to be for last year, but since we didn't have it, we're going to have it as a fundraiser this year. And that'll be available. I'll have it done in.
I'm sorry, when will that be available?
It'll be ready for photographing in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. And what will the fundraiser be going towards?
We haven't made a decision on that yet. It's for the Mumfest. And it'll be tickets for the quilt, but the money will go back to parks.
To parks, okay. Thank you. Councilor Angeloff, I see your hand up. Sorry, Councilor Jaber on the committee there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Any new updates on the skate parks since we're done with the budget now?
Mr. Mayor, would you be able to comment on that?
Still working on it. We are moving forward with EPA funding on looking at Decker Park to see if there's any contaminants. But that's all we have for now. And as I mentioned in my email on Friday, there's been federal earmarks that kind of came out of nowhere that we had to kind of drop everything we were doing and put together some plans and submit those by the deadline. And then, we've got the stimulus plan and a lot of other things. So some of these things we had to kind of put off as we're working on some of these stimulus bills and how we can use that money, because we still haven't gotten clear guidance from the U.S. Treasury on the money from the American Rescue Plan. So just a lot of things on our plates. But in terms of Decker Park, we are looking at doing an environmental over there because of the skate park. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Angeloff, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to address this to Mrs. Coburn. Do you have all the available T-shirts and that for your quilt?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I have all of them put together, getting ready to quilt it.
Because I have probably 30 of them. So, okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anything else from the body? No. Director Patterson, do you have anything for us?
Oh, no, just nothing major. Just getting things squared away here for the spring with leagues and projects and things of that sort, but nothing major. We're working on getting registration software. That'll be a big asset to the department. People can register for programs online, pavilions, rentals, things like that, but nothing major.
Thank you, Director. Do I have anything else from anyone? Councilor Greer?
Hold on. I want to make sure I'm.
You're muted.
There we go. All right. I just remembered when the director was talking that Take Pride in Barberton Day is actually coming up here soon. Barberton Parks reached out on social media and asked if anybody wanted to participate. Just simply notify the Barberton Parks Department. And this is going. It looks like it's a independent cleanup effort this year, like it was last. And the post says that you pick your desired location, date, and group size, and they will provide the supplies.
Thank you,
Yeah, so
Counselor.
that's on the 24th.
April 24th.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone? Well, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that, sir.
Thank you. You're adjourned at 6:06.
Thank you very much. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. DeBevitt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order Public Welfare and Safety. It's Monday, April 12th, 6:07 p.m. We are meeting virtual via GoToMeeting. All members of the committee are present, as well as all others noted. We have several requests for new legislation and one piece of legislation we will be voting on this evening. The first piece of legislation, the first request for legislation is a request for a city council resolution to honor Officer Stephen Coburn for his actions on March 24th, 2021. And I'm sure that we're all aware of his heroic efforts he displayed on a flight from Cleveland to Las Vegas. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this?
So make a motion.
Motion made by Mr. Greer, second by Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. The next request for legislation is a request from Chief Persley to enter into contract with Tim Lally Chevrolet, Inc. in the amount of $105,806 for the purchase of vehicles. I don't know if Mr. Persley is with us. Chief Persley's with us?
I am.
Okay. Oh, you are. I know. I marked you on my sheet. I apologize. Do you want to, so I'm sure not everybody received the letter, just our committee. Do you want to just go over for all of council what this is for?
Sure. So the department has 4 staff vehicles. We have the chief vehicle, the shift commander, which is an emergency response vehicle, a fire prevention, arson investigation vehicle, and then finally the administrative lieutenant. These vehicles have been very problematic over the last couple years, and the repair and reliability costs have increased. I had requested in the budget to replace 2 or 3 of these. So it is in our approved budget at $100,000. After lots of research and talking to different dealers, Tim Lally actually offered the best vehicle. It is below the state procurement price, and that would give us 2 full-size Tahoes. And because of the deal that we were getting, we were able to actually replace a 3rd vehicle. So that's kind of where we are with it. We will be trading in those other vehicles. We were able to get a really good trade-in price for them. which actually put the entire project within our budget to try and do. So with that, that's what I have. If there's any specific questions.
I don't have any. Does anyone on the committee have any questions?
Chair, I have one. Chief, do you know the make and model, or not make and model, the model of these other than the Tahoe? Are these like the just standard Tahoes? Are they like the big country?
It is it's a 2021 Tahoe 4-wheel drive SSV.
Okay.
Does that answer what you were looking for?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
And the price that I should have added this too. The price that we are getting actually includes all of the graphics and all the emergency lighting. And it's all done there at Tim Lally. So we're not going to be hampered by picking up the vehicle and then trying to schedule it for someone else to come in and put in the emergency lighting and graphics. It's all done in-house there.
That's Chair, I just wanted to add the SSV that the chief mentioned stands for Special Service Vehicle. So they actually have two kinds of Tahoes. They have one for the police and one for special service. So it's kind of like the Chevy's version of the police Interceptor. So these are upgraded vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Weaver.
Yep.
Chief, I was just wondering when you will receive those. Are they?
So that's the other reason. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Vivek, I cut you off.
That's okay. I just wondered if it was a lengthy process or if it could be expedited if you're in need of them.
No, it is not a lengthy process, and that is one of the other advantages and why we want to go with Tim Lally. One of the SUVs is actually in stock, and the pickup truck is in stock. So we can have those two. He's anticipating with council and our process, he could probably have those ready for us by the second week of May. The second SUV, but third vehicle, he's anticipating taking delivery of that by the time we get everything in process. So provided everything goes as planned, we should have all three vehicles in our possession, on the road, in service by at the latest the end of May. And I didn't really understand this until we started talking to some of the other vendors. That particular Chevy Tahoe is a very sought after item for emergency services. The one quote that we have, they couldn't even get a 2021. They were going to have to wait and give us a 2022, which would have put us well outside May. We wouldn't even been able to get into that probably until the end of the year. So no, short answer, should be a quick turnaround.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for the chief? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin, second by Mr. Greer. All in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next request for legislation is from Chief Persley to appropriate $24,741.28 from the unappropriated item of the FEMA fund to the fire department capital budget of the FEMA fund to purchase additional emergency communication equipment. So the Barberton Fire Department has $27,215.41 remaining on the Assistance to Firefighters grant that they received earlier to purchase the radio equipment. So The remaining, Keith, you just want to tell us what this is for or what you're planning on purchasing?
Sure. So the grant that we received last year was, the project amount was, I believe, $227,000. Of that, we expended $207,000. The council approved that in, I want to say December or January, but don't quote me on that. So we were able to meet what FEMA allotted. However, there was left within the grant the $27,000. The way it works with AFG, the Assistance to Firefighters grant, you have to meet and expend the money that they allot to you. So because of COVID, because of some other specials, our radio vendor was able to get us the radios at a lower cost than what FEMA allocated, leaving the $27,000. So in order to use that $27,000 for additional radios, I need to write an amendment to FEMA requesting it. That amendment has been approved. So FEMA has approved us to expend the remaining $27,000 to buy the additional portable radios, a mobile, some spare batteries, and a battery charger.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, that's it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Do I have a motion to call for it?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Mr. Greer. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. The next request for legislation is a letter from Chief Persley for a foundation grant request for the smoke detector program. And it's just asking for the approval to submit a grant application to the Barberton Community Foundation in the amount of $910 for the smoke detector program. We had a mix-up and we believed that this was already called for, and it was not. So we've talked about the smoke detector program at length in other safety committee meetings. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? Do I have a motion to call for this?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin.
And I'll second.
Second by Mr. Greer. All in favor?
Aye.
So we will be voting on that. We will not be voting on this piece of legislation this evening, but we will be voting on it in at the next legislative meeting. The piece of legislation we will be voting on this evening is ordinance number 31/2021, and this is an appropriation from the fire department appropriating $1,000 from the unappropriated item of the Fire Prevention and Education Fund to the Fire Prevention and Education Fund operation and maintenance budget for the purchase of smoke detectors for Barberton residents. So does anyone have any questions about that piece of legislation that we will be voting on this evening? Okay. Does anyone have any miscellaneous discussion for safety this evening? Councilman Jaber.
Thank you, Vivek. Chair. Just a reminder, we have 70 vehicles on Gov Deals this week, and the auction ends tomorrow. Right now, we're at $2,025 for 7 vehicles. It's restricted right now to the licensed auto dealers and licensed sellers. That means people with salvage vehicles. I believe there are 7 vehicles. I don't know if Chief is on today. Are those vehicles just backstock, or are those vehicles newer ones that we just received back? I'm not sure. But they're on govdeals.com for this week. Is Chief on today or no? Anybody know? No?
See him.
I'll send him an email, ask him about those. Again, the auction ends tomorrow, so if you guys know anybody, right now it's at $2,025 for 7 vehicles. So far it's generated almost $280 per vehicle, minus fees afterwards, probably go down, of course. Then also next is local 329, Barberton Fire Department. They're doing a raffle. The drawing ends, and it'll be Saturday, August 29th at the Ignite. Chief Persley, if you're on there, can you talk about that, please, if you don't mind?
I will do my best. I believe the raffle is the one that you're speaking of, anyways, is a $6,000 grand prize. A second prize is $3,000, and third prize is $1,000. Tickets are $20 a piece. This would also be a $1,000 donation to Backham, and a $1,000 donation to the local 329 scholarship. The union gives out college scholarships annually to Barberton High School students. That is really all I know about it, other than did you say the drawing date, Councilman Jaber? I'm sorry.
August 28th.
Yeah, from 5 to 9 at Ignite.
Yes, sir.
Other than that, that's about all I know about it.
I did it. Thanks for 329 local for everything you guys do for the community. It's awesome to see that. Thank you.
I will pass that on.
Thank you.
And that would be it, Mrs. DeBevi. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything for safety? Mr. Greer, Mr. Griffin, you have anything?
No, I don't, Mrs. DeBevi. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin.
And I'll second.
Second by Mr. Greer. We are adjourned at 6:23.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeBevick. Next up is Rules, Marketing, and Development with Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is April 12th, 6:26. We are meeting virtual. All members are present tonight, and we have no request for legislation to call for. Do we have any matters for discussion from the body? Or okay, Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind council that I'm still compiling a list of any suggestions for any additional rules, amendments, anything that we deem necessary as we move forward. I would like to package it together to present to the chairman for consideration, probably towards the end of May, because I know we have a lot of other stuff going on. But any suggestions are welcome to be emailed to me or put in my mailbox, any which way you want, and I will compile that, present it to him so we can kind of do one package. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Heidi, would these rule changes be virtual or when we get back to regular meeting?
That I couldn't tell you because I don't know how long we'll be doing this and not being in council chambers.
Mrs. Coburn? You're muted.
Does that question mean pertaining to virtual or?
That's what I'm saying, yes. The rule change pertaining to virtual.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
These would just be, for instance, I've had some suggestions for rules regarding electronic devices, rules regarding possibly addition of a building committee that would meet once a month for a forum for anything building related and so forth. Plus, I'd like to see, when the package is done, an amendment that basically, like we have a charter review commission every 5 years, that would also have a rules committee that we have to look over our own rules every so often, every 4 years, 5 years, what have you. So anything anybody thinks of when they comb through the rules to kind of update it to, 2021 and beyond, I'll take those suggestions, package them up, and present them to the chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heidi. Do we have anything else from the committee or the body?
Mr. Griffin? Oops. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Yes. Would we go through it with the ordinance or the rules, or would we have to go through the voters or the residents to see if we can do a term limit for two terms for city council and also for the mayors? How would that work, Mr. Heidick or Mr. Griffin?
Hi. Mr. Heidi?
Thank you. That would actually have to be a charter amendment that would have to go to the voters. That's not in the council rules itself. We govern ourselves with those rules, but anything regarding anything with elections would have to go to the voters.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Heidick.
If I could add to that, excuse me, Mr. Griffin, if I could add to that, that was brought up at the last meeting they had about the rule changes, and they said they didn't need it because if you do a good job, you'll stick around. If you don't do a good job, you usually get voted out. And that's pretty much a fact. Very few people last that long unless you do a good job. And why would you want to get rid of somebody if they do a good job? So that was their logic behind that question.
Okay, that's understandable.
Mrs.
DeBevick.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and with respect to the collaboration between AMHA, the Barberton Community Foundation, and the City of Barberton for the Wi-Fi, I'm of the belief or understanding that the city's portion came from the CDBG budget. I was just wondering how much we've committed to it and what line item it might be found under in the CDBG budget from 2020. Well, it would be, we haven't passed a CDBG budget for 2021.
Okay, Mr. Flaker, would you know anything about that, or Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I believe the amount is $20,000 or $25,000. I don't have my notes in front of me on that. That's our portion. It may be a little less. Coming from CDBG, I'm not sure if that's going to come from the 2020 allocation or 2021. And I know that the planning department will be coming to council here soon, as they just received notice from HUD on 2021's allocation. So as you may recall from previous years, the federal government and HUD are kind of all over the place with their timing in terms of when they let us know what the allocation is for the year, and then when our reporting is due, and then when we actually get the money. So we'll have more information in the coming weeks here, but the amount is no more than $25,000.
Okay, Mr. Hunt.
Yes, I'm here.
I was just wondering if does that fall under an area that is already, so the CDBG budget is pretty specific. So if we were going to pay for this out of the 2020 CDBG budget, would we not have had to have that decided then? Where does this fall under? What area does this $20,000 or $25,000 fall under?
And this is for sidewalks you're referring to?
No, I was referring to the Wi-Fi collaboration with AMHA, Barberton Community Foundation, and the City of Barberton.
Yeah, I believe this was out of the, this was a request for our COVID money, or CDBG COVID money, but I could be mistaken. I'll have to take another look at that request that came. I believe it was through Akron Metropolitan Housing that submitted that, and that was our COVID money. if I recall correctly, for 25,000.
Okay. So we got separate COVID money for CDBG.
We did. Yeah, there was close to $300,000 we the city received.
Okay. So I don't know if this actually falls under rules, but because you're asking this question, and is that where we're paying for the library's equipment from?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Heidi?
Thank you, Chair. I have the breakdown here. It says the project will be the Wi-Fi project will be funded collaboratively with AMHA contributing $65,000, Barberton City Schools $50,000, the City of Barberton $20,000, and the Barberton Community Foundation $18,000 for a total estimated project cost of $153,000.
Thank you, sir. Did that answer your question, Mrs. DeBevick, a little bit?
Yes. I believe Mrs. Miller has her hand up. I don't know if you can see her.
No, I can't. Oh, yes, I do. Mrs. Miller on the other screen.
I was unaware that we had a $300,000 COVID CDBG allocation. Was that, did everyone know that?
If I may, Chair?
Yeah.
Mr. Heidi, yes.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was in the first quarter of last year. There was it came with a sheet of very, very, very specific things that money could be used for that went to it. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that 300,000 rings a bell with, I believe, March or April last year, part of the CARES Act, but I could be wrong.
So, Mr. Heidick, what was that $300,000 allocated for?
I would have to go back. It was a one sheet of paper, and I remember that with the different notes that were allowed to be used for. I remember even saying to myself that there wasn't a whole lot Barberton could do with those type of items with only 300,000, because I was pretty adamant that it was better served as a regional thing rather than a split between every city, because places like New Franklin got significantly less, and I'm not sure they would have been able to do anything with the restrictions on that money. I will look it back up there, but I'm almost positive that 300,000 is ringing a bell that was for that.
So of the 300,000, Trevor, of the 300,000 of COVID CDBG money, what has the city of Barberton spent that 300,000 on?
We've allocated over 100,000 of that. If any of you have been involved in the Mayor's Weekly Tuesday calls, I mentioned to the larger group that we have roughly $200,000 of that still remaining. I know that the service director, Greg Tracy, was looking at a couple things, that Parks director, Don Patterson, was looking at a couple things, but the language is very strict in terms of what you can be using that for, and it has to essentially contribute to the reduction of the spread of the COVID. So, for instance, I know some communities have looked at contactless, like bathrooms, and kind of using more electronic features rather than having people, grabbing door handles and things like that, and that's one example. So
I'll let Carol. I'll let Mrs. Fry go first, and then I'll ask my other question.
I'm not finished.
Welcome, Mr.
So
Miller.
we have $300,000 allocation. We have $200,000 left. Of the $100,000 that we spent, $25,000 went to this AMHA project. Is that correct?
that's one of the items, yes.
So what is the other $75,000 spent on?
Some of that went to different businesses within the community that showed a loss with COVID. You could apply for $5,000 to $10,000 depending on if you were a small business of one employee or two employees or more. that was a large. The library was the other thing I mentioned. The audio visual and the HVAC equipment there. I don't have the report in front of me, but I can dig it up. But those largely were the big items that we contributed to. So,
And how is that information communicated to businesses?
So when Melissa McFadden was here, she was in charge of the program, but there was a lot of PR. I know this was out in the Barberton Herald. I know this was out through a number, I believe the city's website. There were a number of mediums that was sent through. So, and I brought this up too on the mayor's weekly Tuesday calls for departments. I know I've brought that up multiple times over the past 6 months or so. So.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm asking because that is the reason why I'm asking so many questions is this is certainly an issue for the courts and for my office. That's why I was asking in terms of the courts. That's why I just had a couple questions. Thank you.
Also, I believe that Summit County provided us a list of businesses through their database for us to contact, in part with some of the funding they received from the CARES Act funding as well.
Okay. Mrs. Fry? Mute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. I just wanted to add that I know where I think 10,000 of it went. It was for the CARES Act money, and at the time, it was brought up about the homeless community, and COVID was affecting the homeless community, and we have a pretty big one here in Barberton. And I know that 10,000 of it was allocated to work with a company that is kind of like psychologists or something along that line, and they go out into the community and speak with the homeless people and find out exactly why they are, why they continue to be homeless, and try to help them in various ways to maybe get back on their feet. But I just wanted to say that I did remember that one particular allocation, and it was for $10,000. And we all got a report regarding where the money went, and I've been looking for it while we're on the phone here, but I do have it somewhere. But all of the money was, included in the report that we got from Melissa. And that's all I wanted to say. Okay. Thank you.
So the money that we gave this particular group, we do have a paper trail on how they spent it and what they did and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Are you asking me that?
Yes. Or something you want to know to notice?
I would say, any paper trail would be out of planning, because they are who took care of the allocation and spending the money. So all I have somewhere here is the report documenting where they were going to use the money. That's all I have.
Thank you.
We're required by CDBG to keep records there, so we do have that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mrs. Angeloff, do you have anything?
I was just going to say that the planning department, they have like a spreadsheet. They have to keep every penny allowed for and spending for, because they answer to the state. So that would be in the planning department, but Mr. Hunt already said that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more matters of discussion?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, Mrs. DeBevick.
I have just one more question, or I don't know if it's a statement or a question, but Mr. Hunt 2 times alluded to the fact that we were all made aware during the mayor's weekly Tuesday calls. Yeah. But just for the record, I'm unaware of any Tuesday calls. Are other council members aware of this? Because I've never sat through a Tuesday call.
No, this Tuesday calls for internal department heads surrounding COVID. I think he was just mentioning it as another source or another outlet that this was mentioned. But if council, if you remember, when we were meeting at the Active Adult Center, the CDBG coordinator at the time, Melissa McFadden, did do a presentation in front of council on CDBG and on the COVID CDBG allocation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any more matters of discussion from the committee or the body? Or do I like to entertain a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jaber.
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick. We are adjourned at 6:41.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up is City Utilities with Mrs. Colbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call to order the City Utilities meeting. This is Monday, April the 12th. We're meeting virtually. All members are present. We have a request for legislation, an ordinance request from Mr. Weaver, requesting the mayor to enter into a professional engineering services contract with Burgess and Nipple for the Wolf Creek Dam inspection. Additional services for the determination of probable maximum flood project. The amount is not to exceed a lot, $49400. I don't read those very well. $49,400, and emergency wording will be requested. This is something we have to do before we can apply for the grants for the repair of the dam. And Mr. Weaver is available to answer any questions if we have any. Do we have any questions from the committee? No? Do we have a motion?
Mrs.
Carla,
Scope,
Mrs. Bevick?
I'm just going to assume that there was no bid process for this because it was a professional service. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to call for this? Mrs. Fry?
I will make a motion to call for it. I will make a motion to call for this piece of legislation.
Do I have a second? I'll make the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a second request for, this is pending legislation, is ordinance number 27, foundation grant request for the foundation field lighting upgrade, and ordinance appropriating the submission of a grant application to the Barberton Community Foundation for the foundation field lighting upgrade and declaring an emergency. This, we've already called for this. So is there any remarks pertaining to this one? We'll be voting on it tonight. Okay. Is there any other miscellaneous discussion for the utilities? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a
Carla?
motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay. And we are adjourned at 6:44. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Colbert. Next up is Finance and Personnel with Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight it is April the 12th, Monday, April 12th, and the time is 6:45. and we are beginning the meeting for Finance and Personnel. We are meeting virtually on GoToMeeting. All members of the committee are present, as well as all council members and guests as noted on my agenda sheet. The first topic for discussion is that we received a letter from Elizabeth Doherty, Director of Public Safety and Human Resources, requesting ordinance number 129, 2019, amending ordinance number 38-2019, employees not included in non-bargaining pay grades, to be amended to reflect the Ohio minimum wage increase from $8.70 to $8.80 as follows. And Mrs. Doherty has provided a list of the different positions that we have throughout the city and what the new rates for those particular positions will be. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? I can't see everybody's hands, so if you have a question, please speak up. Not everybody is on my screen. Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this piece of legislation?
I'll make a motion.
Motion made by Mrs. DeVevick and seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Tonight we have several pieces of pending legislation on the agenda. The first is ordinance number 28, 2021, titled Norton Water Sewer JED Agreement. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the city of Barberton and the city of Norton, extending the current joint economic development district agreement. This is going to go 3 readings because there needs to be a few tweaks to this agreement. It's not an agreement that we can negotiate, however. Just some of the wording that's in there needs to be gone over and updated. But as I said, it will go 3 readings. And I believe that the mayor did send everyone a copy of that particular agreement. So if you have any questions, you should contact him regarding those questions. The next piece of legislation that we have for this evening that we'll be voting on is ordinance number 29-2021, titled Authorized Payment, Barberton Public Library. And this is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay an invoice to the Barberton Public Library in the amount of $20,000 for audiovisual equipment and declaring an emergency. And we have discussed this in previous meetings. And this was a COVID grant that the library applied for through the city for the audiovisual equipment. And we are going to pay them back from that grant money because the city received it. Do I have any questions about that? Again, I cannot see most of you, so if you have something to say, please just speak up. No questions? Okay, the next piece of legislation that is on the agenda for this evening is ordinance number 30-2021. This is titled Authorized Payment, Browse McDowell, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay an invoice to Browse McDowell in the amount of $10,875 for legal services rendered and declaring an emergency. Does anyone have any questions regarding this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I'll move on to the next ordinance that's on the agenda for this evening. Ordinance number 34-2021. It is titled Create New Fund, American Rescue Plan Grant Fund. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to create a new revenue fund, the American Rescue Plan Grant Fund, and declaring an emergency. This is a new fund that is being created so that we can accept the payments when we get them from the U.S. Treasury. This is for the American Rescue Plan. Any questions about this? No. I would like to ask Mr. Flaker if he would like to do the budget report tonight for March, or if you want to wait till next week.
Oh, I can go over it tonight if that's fine with you.
Yeah, that would be fine.
All right. So let's start for March of 2021. Let's start with the healthcare fund. The revenues for the month of March were just over $403,000. Expenditures came in a little over $352,000. Our unexpended fund balance in that account or in that fund is $1,078,000. Our net year to date is a positive. It's just under $68,000. Moving on to the income tax fund. The estimate for the month of March was just under $897,000. Our actual came in at $895,000. So our actual and estimate were very close this month, which is a good thing. I'm going to continue to monitor April. I have a feeling April will possibly come in a little bit lower, just for the main fact the income tax date being moved back. So I think we're going to kind of see what we saw last year, where we had a bigger bump up, possibly just a month later this year, though, as opposed to last year. Still monitoring it, though, because if you see, we are under our estimate by $378,000. So why I think part of that is attributed to switching income tax agencies. I'm going to continue to monitor that once the tax season's over. Once filing season's over, I'm going to monitor that closely because I will have to keep an eye on that if it doesn't start bumping up a little bit. We did transfer $780,000 to the general fund this month. You will also, in the month of April, when I go over this report next month, you'll start seeing the other transfers that were in the budget that was approved by the council in the budget. You'll start seeing those transfers start appearing in that. Moving on to the statement of cash receipts and disbursements for the month of March. We have a few funds in the negative. First fund in the negative is the Sports Complex Operating Fund. That's in the negative due to the encumbrances outstanding. We have a little over $4,800 in encumbrances outstanding, putting the unencumbered cash balance in the negative. I'm not too concerned because we should start seeing fees for the various tournaments and that will be held down there. So that will help bring that cash balance up and get that fund out of the negative. The next fund in the negative is the FEMA fund, Fund 239. As mentioned many times before, that is the fund that the fire department's using for the radios. That's also the fund being used for the stormwater projects on 14th Street, buying those homes. So once we expend the money, we can then turn in the expenditures into FEMA and get reimbursed for it. So at the end of the day, that fund should balance itself out once we get expend all the money and get reimbursed for it. Same thing for the next fund, CDBG. That's the federal HUD program. Once again, we have to expend the money. We turn the expenditures in. They reimburse us for it. The next fund in the negative is the health insurance fund, Fund 660. It's on the next page. That is in the negative due to the encumbrances outstanding. That big encumbrance outstanding is our yearly healthcare fees to the county. So as the year goes on, you'll notice the encumbrance outstanding will get smaller. The unencumbered cash balance the negative number will start going down, just like it did last year. Probably if I had to predict, probably September, October, sometime around there. If not, maybe August, that will get out of the negative and be a positive number again. Because once we go and we get built by Summit County and we pay them and charge it back to the department. The other fund in the negative is the internal cost allocation fund. There, the cash balance is in the negative. This is partially due, not partially, it is totally because our fuel pump system that we had, it was very old and it finally gave up on us. So we had to get a new fuel system. So we're working on trying to get the fuel reports from the month of February and March. The company that we sent the units to, they said they'll be able to pull that information for us. So once we get actual information, we can do the chargebacks for the months of February and March to the departments for the fuel, and that will help get that out of the cash balance out of a negative. But the encumbrances outstanding will probably keep that fund in a negative until we, as we keep going on and charging back the various departments for the fuel usage throughout the year. So I'll keep monitoring that, and by the end of the year, we should be fine with that one. And I just want to bring to your attention that payroll clearing fund that's below that. It has a 0 in parentheses, which usually signifies something being in a negative. I double checked. It's a 0 balance completely. We could actually remove that because that is just the payroll clearing fund that we use for payroll. It has nothing to do with any of the budgets or anything like that. Going on to the last 3 months of activity, if you look at the general fund, it went down about $400,000 compared to last month. A lot of that has to deal with encumbrances outstanding. You'll notice that the previous months, our encumbrances were about $575,000. The month of March, the encumbrances outstanding went almost to $1.3 million. A lot of that has to deal with the budget being passed, and as soon as the budget passed, departments going in, entering their encumbrances for possible projects that they have going on, various other encumbrances that they need for the year. So that's why that shot up. We should see that encumbrance outstanding go down throughout the, stay around the same or go down as the year goes on. The special revenue funds went up by about $400,000. Part of that is the disbursements being down, receipts being up, and us not transferring as much from income tax to general fund. Enterprise funds went up by about $1 million. A lot of that has to deal with our receipts were up this past month, and the encumbrances outstanding went down. So why expenses stayed the same. So between those two things, it helped bring that fund balance up by about $1 million. And then all other funds, you'll see the unencumbered cash balance being in a negative. However, if you look at the cash balance has remained the same from last month to this month. The only difference is the encumbrances outstanding. And like I said, that is due to us taking out the PO for the year for the Summit County, what we have to pay Summit County for healthcare costs. And then going to comparing last March 2020 to March 2021, the unencumbered cash balance is up in the general fund compared to last year. Majority of that is from the CARES Act, being able to reclassify police and fire wages from last year. Special revenue funds are up by about $900,000. Enterprise funds are up by about $600,000. All other funds, you'll notice, is kind of in the same ballpark as last year, being a negative number. And like I said, that has to deal just with the Summit County, the PO that we have to Summit County for our health care. Like I said, as the year goes on, that negative number will start going down and become a positive number and go back up. And with that, that's all I have.
You're muted, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flaker. Does anyone have any questions about the budget for Mr. Flaker? No? Okay, do I have a motion to call for the March 2021 budget report? Mrs. Angeloff? Motion made by Ms. and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. I wanted to direct this to Lori. If she could, I was going to ask her if she could add this to tonight's agenda so that we could vote on the budget after we vote on the committee. I mean the meeting notes. Okay.
Mrs. Fry?
Mrs. Angeloff? Oh, okay. I'm
It
sorry.
is on. It is
Oh, it
on
is on?
the.
Okay,
Yep.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, are there any other questions for finance and personnel? Mr. Heidig.
Thank you, Chair. In dealing with personnel, it was brought up, I believe, last week with a new employee in the planning department. There's been some talk of, new hires and notifying people. I would like to see, if new people are hired, especially within administrative departments, just email that has everybody tagged that gives us their name, what they'll be doing, and basically a welcome to the team Barberton thing. It's I think that promotes teamwork there. I know Councilor Jaber has been quite candid about wanting to meet people and wanting to know who they are, but when someone's hired, maybe just a mass email, just make that person feel welcome. They're going to be a part of our team. You don't want to go into a department and find somebody you don't know and they don't know you. But I just think it'd be a nice thing that we all got just that email that says everybody on it. Say, hey, feel free to welcome this person aboard and welcome to Barberton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heidig. Does anyone else have any comments
Mrs.
or
Fry,
questions? Yes.
I have a comment or a question. I don't know if I know Chief Morber isn't on here right now, but after sitting here thinking about it, Councilman Jaber mentioned that there were 7 at the end of safety, and of course it takes my mind a little bit of time to process conversations. That 7 vehicles were on govdeals.gov.com for scrap. Mrs. Doherty, do you happen to know if those are part of the last piece of legislation? Because we haven't had a piece of legislation since January 21st regarding permission to scrap or salvage vehicles. And I'm just wondering what these vehicles are from. And if it's under a certain number of vehicles, if it doesn't require an ordinance passed by safety. I don't know if anyone can answer that question. That's a solid no.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
I walked away for a moment and came back and caught the tail end.
It's okay.
Could you repeat your question? I might be able to answer it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can answer it or not. If not, I can send an email. Councilman Jaber indicated that there were 7 vehicles for scrap or salvage on Gov Deals that will be sold tomorrow or auctioned by tomorrow. We haven't had any legislation from safety since January, since late January regarding the sale of scrap or salvage vehicles. And I'm just wondering where these are from and if these would have required an ordinance, or if it's under a certain number of vehicles, it doesn't require an ordinance.
I believe Chief Morber did his research on this. I don't know if he spoke with the law director, but I believe that this is done by ORC, and that's why. And I think doing the research with the recent discussions about auctions, I think is when he realized we didn't. And I don't want to speak for the chief, but I believe this was what his research told him is that it's ORC statute, so we don't necessarily need an ordinance, is my impression. That could be wrong, but that's the way I understood it.
Okay, so basically, if you use GovDeals, you don't need you don't.
No, I'm talking about the sale of vehicles, period, salvage vehicles, period.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't ever come to City Council. Okay.
Well, I don't know that, Mrs. DeBevick, for a fact. I'm just telling you what I recollect from talking to the.
Okay, I'll send him an email. I just thought maybe someone knew. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments for finance and personnel? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Angeloff? Mrs. Angeloff made a motion, and Mrs. DeBevick seconded that motion, and we are adjourned at 7:06 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our committee reports. Does anybody need a break?
Mr. President?
Yes?
I did find the research for that CARES Act that modified the CBDG action plan from 2019 into 2020. It was ordinance number 48/2020.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody need a break? If not, we'll go right into our meeting. Okay. Just remember to hit your mute button when you're not speaking to prevent the feedback. Okay? Okay, we'll get right into our meeting. This is a regular legislative meeting in the Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, April 12th, 2021. The time is 7:07. And we have something new tonight, so please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Mrs. Fry. All right. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United
States of America
and
to the republic for which it
stands one nation under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, as the world continues to deal with the pandemic and its aftermath, we pray that you will intervene and guide us in making good and thoughtful decisions. Please open our eyes and hearts to the suffering of all your children. Protect our nurses, doctors, scientists, first responders, and military personnel. Let us all turn our attention to you and your teachings that we may grow stronger in faith and purpose. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Anderson?
Here.
Mrs. Coburn? Here. Mrs. DeBevick?
Here.
Mrs. Fry?
Here.
Mr. Greer?
Present.
Mr. Griffin?
Here.
Mr. Heidick?
Here.
Mr. Jaber?
Here.
Okay, Council Rule 103 states that the regular and committee of the whole meetings shall be at 7:30 p.m. Since we are starting at 7:09, we need to invoke Council Rule 702. I need a motion. Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 103.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to invoke 702.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Heidick to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 103. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting. Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 29th, 2021, as presented.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion for approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting from Monday, March 29th, 2021.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Heidick to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 29th, 2021, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are adopted. Approval of the financial report for the month of March 2021 as presented. Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the acceptance of the Finance Department report for the month of March 2021 as presented.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on acceptance.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to approve the financial report for the month of March 2021 as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The March 2021 financial report is adopted. Petitions and claims.
There are none.
Matters requested.
They've all been listed and emailed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council.
There are none.
First reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 27-2021 presented by Mr. Coburn. Title, Foundation Grant Request. Foundation Field Lighting Upgrade. An ordinance approving the submission of a grant application to the Barberton Community Foundation for the Foundation Field Lighting Upgrade and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules as required by Section 5.10 of the City of Barberton Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to suspend.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and second by Mrs. Fry to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber. Mr. Jaber.
Not seeing him. Is he on?
He's a caller. He's the last caller in. I put his name on there.
Okay.
If somebody wants to try calling him, Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
He's back now.
He's back?
I think so. It says he's back on the one screen.
There
Yeah,
he
he's
is.
back.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 27-2021.
Thank you, and Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Coburn's motion to adopt ordinance number 27-2021.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry, by Mrs. Coburn, second by Mrs. Fry, to adopt ordinance number 2721. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
and Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Ordinance number 28, 2021. Presented by Ms. Fry. Title, Norton Water Sewer JED Agreement. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement between the city of Barberton and the city of Norton, extending the current joint economic development district agreement, JED. That one is going to go 3 readings. Ordinance 29-2021, presented by Mrs. Fry. Title, Authorized Payment, Barberton Public Library. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay, an ordinance to the Barberton Public Library in the amount of $20,000 for audio-visual equipment and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn, you're muted, Joyce. Okay, we'll come back to Joyce. Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 29-2021.
Thank you, and Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick, to adopt ordinance number 29-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Ordinance 30-2021, presented by Mrs. Fry. Title, Authorized Payment, Rouse McDowell, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay an invoice to Rouse McDowell in the amount of $10,875 for legal services rendered and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
and Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 30-2021.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 30-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Ordinance 30-2021, presented by Mrs. DeBevick. Title, Appropriation Fire Department, an ordinance appropriating $1,000 from the unappropriated item of the Fire Prevention and Education Fund to the Fire Prevention and Education Fund operation and maintenance budget for the purchase of smoke detectors for Barberton residents and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. For the record, that was ordinance number 31-2021. Motion to suspend, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. DeBevick's motion for suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick, second by Mr. Greer to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. DeBevitt,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 31-2021.
Thank you. And Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second the motion for adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Greer to adopt ordinance number 31, 2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
I said yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 32, 2021, presented by Mr. Greer. Title, enter into contract, ODOT, 2nd Street, Worcester Road, Norton Avenue, final resolution. Final resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for the improvement of 2nd Street Southwest, Worcester Road North, and Norton Avenue, PID 108372, declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to suspend.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Greer, second by Mrs. Angela to suspend rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Heidick,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance, or resolution number 32-2021.
And Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to adopt.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Greer and second by Mrs. Angela to adopt resolution number 32, 2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Okay, resolution 33, 2021, presented by Mr. Greer. Title, enter into contract, ODOT, Worcester Road, Robinson Avenue. A resolution of the city, a resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for the improvement of Worcester Road West from Robinson Avenue to 4th Street Northwest and the intersection of Worcester Road North and State Streets, PID 106539, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll second the motion to suspend resolution 33-2021.
Okay, that was for suspension. The motion
I'm
was
sorry,
made by
I did say suspension, didn't I? For suspension.
Okay. Motion was made by Mr. Greer and second by Mrs. Angela to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Heidig,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Greer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 33-2021.
Thank you. And Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the motion to adopt.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Greer, second by Mrs. Angeloff to adopt resolution number 33-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Coburn,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Heidig,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ordinance number 34, 2021, presented by Mrs. Fry. Titled, Create New Fund, American Rescue Plan Grant Fund. An ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to create a new revenue fund, the American Rescue Grant Fund, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule is required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Heidig,
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 34-2021.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry, second by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 34-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Fry,
Yes.
Mr. Heidig,
Yes.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick,
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff,
Yes.
Mr. Jaber,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
This ends the first readings.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Third reading of ordinances and resolution.
There are none.
Appointments.
There are none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes. The design review board that's scheduled for tomorrow has been canceled. And I'd like to take note of this, that I would like to personally address a comment that was made on social media at last week's council meeting. I will not be retiring. I will not be stepping down as Ward 2 councilperson. I too was elected by the people in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, with COVID, we had a successful vaccination clinic. We worked with Access Point last week. So, I want to thank Councilperson Jaber, Heidick, Griffin, and Coburn for participating. We had some members of the health board who participated as well. So is any questions about that, the vaccination clinic?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Mayor. Do you know if they're going to be having any more anytime soon?
I do not know. They were very pleased. This is the second one they had in town. Very pleased with our participation and also working with Prince of Peace, the first one, and the Barberton City Schools, the second one. And like I had mentioned to you that day, they kind of let me know last minute. So I try to get the word out as quickly as possible. Access Point is in charge of scheduling all the appointments as they use their client list. And then we're just there if we have masks and things like that we can give out.
One last question on that, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Are people free to call Access Point to get on this list so that when they do have one, they can be notified immediately?
I'm not sure how they run that section of the vaccination clinic. And they did not give me any updates on any future ones throughout the region. But I know that they had previously gone to the northern part of Akron and to Kent. But short answer is I'm not sure how they do their outreach and how they get their list. So I would encourage people to call, and they may be able to, but I can't promise that anything.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes.
Is there any way that you, if there is another one, that you can send an email to all of council members so that if we would like to participate or share the information or show up and help, that we would be aware of it?
Yeah, I can do that, I guess. As I mentioned to Councilman Heidick with this last one, we're on the outside. We don't even go inside to where everything's being done. And we just hand bags of masks and sanitizer or whatever we have to the person as they leave. So, trying to take in all the mandates with social distancing and all that. You don't want too many volunteers there. And so I give it out to the Board of Health in Barberton here. They don't have a budget and they like to get active. And on my email with the health board for Barberton is the health committee of council. So that's all those council members were aware.
So only the how many people are on the health committee? Only 4, or there were 4 council members there.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the health committee before, and I'm still listed, okay, so that's how I got notified.
Okay. I just think it would be nice as council members to be informed about it. That's all I'm asking. If that's not too much. Thank you.
And I'll try. They let me know last minute. I'm trying to get the information out. I'm trying to schedule when people can be there. This is all at the last minute, so I'm trying to stay up. And Mr. Griffin, Councilman Griffin, I don't even think I responded to you when you asked what time you should be there. Looking back to my emails. So yeah, I'll try, but when this is last minute, it's very difficult to get everything scheduled time-wise and get the word out, and trying to determine how much we have to give out in terms of mask and sanitizer and everything else. So, for sure, I'll try. So hopefully another one here in the future, but they are looking at more mobile and working on with shut-ins on getting the vaccines out. But then there's also a backlog now, or they're anticipating one with some of the doses and of the vaccine. J&J had some issues with some of their batches, and I know logistically some of the other Pfizer, Moderna, they are experiencing some backlog logistically. So, but if anyone has any question, all they have to do is contact me on these things. So, and I'll get you as much information as I can. To go over some of the numbers, we are starting to see numbers increase. We saw kind of a steady decline over the last, February, March time period, and we're starting to see that go up. Count statewide, we did see one county move from the lowest level yellow up to orange, but Summit County and 31 other counties are still at level red. 51 other counties are still level red. So Ohio is still kind of a hotbed. The vaccine, there's in the state of Ohio, 2.6 million people have been completed with all the vaccines. Another 4.1 million have received at least one of the shots, so they're kind of in the middle there. Still working with the county on the rental assistance program and the utility assistance. As I mentioned before, the federal stimulus, still waiting to get more information. Council has any questions or thoughts or ideas on the usage of that money, please send those to Councilwoman Fry as she sits on the committee I put together to discuss these things. The White House, I got notice today, is starting a weekly briefing call on the American Jobs Plan. So not only did we have the earmarks, and now we have the American Rescue Plan, more information will be coming out with the American Jobs Plan, and that starts this week, that phone call. But moving forward, I still think it's important that Council continue to discuss our revenue and income tax. These stimulus programs, some can be, we're not sure how they can be used and what that'll mean for Barberton. But I think looking long term, we have to have these discussions. Instead of having them in October, we should start having them now. As you see, we're down for the year to date 13%, over almost 13.5% on our income tax. So, and we're starting to see many retail and commercial businesses reducing their footprints and closing more brick and mortar facilities, trading that for more online commerce. So whether that's, you're starting to see more with colleges and universities, banks, retail stores, opting for the online sales versus in person. So I'm not sure what that'll do to our kind of local economy here, but we're taking all this information in. So, sir, I think that's all I have for this day.
Thank you very much. Anything else from the good of the body or department head? Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question for the mayor regarding the comment he just made about council getting together and doing something about a tax rollback or something of that nature. And I wondered how quickly we would have to have that to the Board of Elections to get that, or we don't even have to do that. We can do that in-house, right? We can make that decision.
So if you're talking about a rollback, and there's several ways of doing that, yes, that takes council's action only, not voter approval. But in the same token, it takes council action to do away with it. So it's a little more flexible. So yes, no time frame there. Council could vote on something now and have it start in 2022. So giving enough time and leeway and all that. So there is greater flexibility with that.
Okay, thank you. I thought about that after I started to ask the question and remembered that we could do that in-house. I also wanted to say, if we do something of that nature, how quickly would you like to get working on that? Because we're going to have some discussions within council to see how people feel about, what we should do to increase our revenues. I
think that it's appropriate to start that discussion now. Mm-hmm. But even with that, there's still the same kind of unknowns that there were last year. If you think about people working from home and they're paying taxed to the city that they work in, not necessarily the city they live in. So there's still been a lot of discussion on, should that changed? Let's say that is changed. How does that affect the city of Barberton? We're not exactly sure because we don't have those figures. And I know that some companies will have people, they're starting to call them back in the office, or finding out that some employees are more productive at home while other ones need to be in the office setting. So some companies are doing it, there's no like one plan for everybody. Some of them are picking and choosing, and some of them are, hey, you're 3 months at home, you're 3 months in the office. So it gets very confusing that way.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Fry, just by looking at the calendar for any income tax initiative that would be on the ballot, it would most likely have to be at the Board of Elections no later than either August 3rd or 4th to be on the November ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heidick, but I don't think we're going to go that route. They pretty much told us that they didn't want to go with property taxes. So, we're going to have to think of some other options. And while we're talking about that, I did have one more question to follow up about what the mayor just said. And I don't know if something would have to be passed on the state level to let communities start getting the income tax for people that are working at home. And also, would Rita have some kind of a program that would tell us where people work, and so that we could somehow track who is supposed to be paying income taxes to the city of Barberton if they are in fact working at home?
That would be state action to make that change on paying where you live versus where you work. And there's been some discussion in Columbus. I'm not sure how far it's gotten. I don't know if Mr. Flaker would have a better idea of Rita's capability, but I would assume that they could. If the state law changes, they'd have to start reporting things differently. But Mr. Flaker may have some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I can piggyback on that some. I do know it's at I want to say the state Supreme Court on the whole people working from home. Should income tax be withheld at the business level where the business is located, or where these people are working from home? Like I said, I'm pretty sure that's at the state Supreme Court. I haven't heard any more about it in the past few months. I do try to keep up on that because I am curious what kind of effect that would have on the city. I know we discussed this previously. I don't think there would be a big impact. Now, as for Rita being able to tell us what citizens are working from home, as the mayor said, the tax law would have to change regarding the income tax being withheld where the business is, or if the person's working from home. That would be one telling thing. But if it doesn't change, there's no way of Rita knowing that, I'm just going to throw a name out here, Joe Smith or Bob Miller or anything like that. They won't have any information if that person's working from home or if that person's working in the office, as long as income tax is still being withheld where the person works. So, like I said, I don't know. Rita can possibly do some projections on what the effect would be on Barberton if that would change. However, they probably, like I said, they don't know where if the people are working from home or if they're working from the office.
Excuse me. Therefore, you're saying that it will be up to the companies to report.
Yeah. When the company does the payroll for those employees, those more likely the companies itself will have to know where that person's living if they're working from home and figure out that tax rate and withhold it at that tax rate for the employee. I do know some places don't withhold city tax, but that's usually just the post office. For everyone else, city tax is withheld for a company. So yeah, like I said, the companies would have to figure that out and withhold at where the person lives at that point in time.
Thank you very much. And you'll be probably the first person in the city that even is aware of, that change, if that does come about.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
All right. Thank you so much.
Anything else from the body? I have one thing about the committee meeting report minutes, the reports. We need to get those to Lori at a timely manner so she can take care of business with them and document them. And that's all I have. With nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I make the motion to adjourn, Laura, would it be okay if we scanned and emailed those to you?
Sure. That'd be fine. That'd be fine.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you. And Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Heidi that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? This meeting is adjourned at 7:51. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Hey, Craig.
Good night.
You too. Good night, everyone.
I know we're adjourned. Real quick, there was an email that went out about the yard sales.